This
Jeff.
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, welcome everybody to another edition of Squash Canada's webinar series. Tonight's webinar series is specifically athlete development in our new kind of new series on this topic that will be kind of rolled out over the coming weeks and months. We've got back-to-back weeks with topics being presented by our Director of Athlete Development, Jamie Nicholls, as well as his guest speaker, Derek Vandenbrink tonight. Tonight's topic is on national physical and technical testing. And so they're going to get into the specifics, but it's pretty much what you would expect it to be, and enhancing performance for athletes from playground to podium in relation to performance testing and everything that goes with it. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie and Derek. A couple of ground rules. If you do have questions, please type them into the chat, and I will facilitate all questions and ask them as we go through the presentation. So again, if you have a question, type it into chat, and we will take it away. Go ahead, Derek and Jamie.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff. So Derek, you can start. You're just going to man the presentation. So you can flip to the next one. But just a really warm welcome to everybody for coming on. Got a lot of folks from BC, so I appreciate you're probably just finishing up school or maybe at the squash club all the way to Newfoundland. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with people from coast to coast. So just before we turn it over to Derek, this is mostly a physical and technical testing webinar, but I'm just going to take the time to talk about the series in general and just a couple of overarching themes you'll start to see from the Squash Canada Athlete Development Program. So quickly about me, I see a lot of familiar faces there, but some not yet. So I've been the Director of Athlete Development at Squash Canada for 6 months now. Certainly not what I had in mind when I took the position. I was hoping to be on court a lot, flying around the country. But we have been using this opportunity to do a lot of legwork behind the scenes. And so, I'm excited about what's to come, and I'm excited about what we've already accomplished in a fairly short time. So I've been in squash all my life. Grew up in the 90s. Great time to grow up if you're a squash player. Quickly became a squash pro in Toronto at the BNR. I grew a fairly big program there. And then we went on to build the National Squash Academy with JP and Gary Waite, which was a lot of fun. And in 2016, I took over as the Executive Director and Performance Director at Squash Ontario. And now I'm here, and I'm just so pumped about being able to be a part of what's possible for Canadian squash going forward. So, like I said, I'm going to give you a quick overview of some of the things that are coming down the pipeline, some of the things I'm thinking about, and then I'll turn it over to Derek. So, we're putting together a plan right now that's essentially a 10-year plan. So nothing's going to happen overnight, and we're taking the opportunity to really put the infrastructure that maybe we've been lacking for the last 25 years in place. And we're going to have a world-class athlete development program all the way from playground to podium. And a big key to that is just the collaboration and the ability to work with coaches across the country and grow things together. So that's sort of my philosophy is and a strength that I can bring to the table is bringing all of the coaches and athletes together. And the only way we're going to get to where we want to go is if we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. So you'll hear more about that. But the first sort of 5-year section of the plan is to really get that athlete development program in place. You're going to hear about one of the pillars today, but we're putting the bones and the infrastructure in the ground. So between 2026 and 2030, we can start to produce world champions again, and we have a consistent top 4 world standing. Derek? So a couple of pillars of the first phase. Define an integrated athlete pathway, so you'll see a part of that today. That's a big component. We need to increase our junior base. We know that's critical. We need to increase our performance, so we've put in targets of 10% annually. 10% over 5 years is pretty good. We know we need to sustain and maximize our current national team potential. We know revenue generation and increased exposure for our sport will be critical. And we know we need a facility plan to get to 2030. So my belief is that schools and universities, things like outdoor courts, are going to be necessary in order to drive sort of the volume needed to get the commercial courts back humming again. So today we're going to talk about the athlete pathway. And I see there's lots of coaches and athletes coaches and athletes on the webinar, so this will be relevant to everybody. So the goal is to work with the provinces and territories and maximize our resources. Instead of overlaying programming on top, we are going to integrate into what's already happening. So all the great coaches and all the great work that's being done, we were going to tap into that. And that's really paramount to the whole sort of philosophy. We're going to be establishing 6 provincial training centers, Vancouver, Calgary, Prairie, Toronto, Montreal, and Atlantic Canada. And these are going to act as virtual hubs where we can come together. The best players in those regions and the best coaches will be brought together at regular intervals, and that's where the magic's going to start to happen. Additional regional centers that will be supported by Squash Canada and the PTs will also be in some of the larger areas that aren't specifically in a hub. And so we're going to have this network of athletes and coaches, and a player will be able to move from their club program to a regional program to their provincial training center, right up through to the national team. Everyone's going to be having similar messaging. Everyone's going to be communicating with everyone, and it's going to be a coordinated pathway. So what we're going to talk about today is National Physical and Testing Program, which we know is a part of this, that has defined benchmarks combined with athlete and coach accountability for things like YPIs, training logs, and competition schedules. The last note here is the domestic and international travel support to ensure our best players and coaches train and compete together and get exposure outside of Canada as well. Okay, National Testing Program. So we've got a legend of testing on the call, I believe Bob Bowers. We've also got Jamie Hickok's family is on here. So a lot of great work has been done in the past within Squash Canada to develop testing programs. It's been specifically geared towards really, really high performance and national team members. And there's been some phenomenal work done. We've been going through the archives and looking at all of that. So we want to build on what's being done. We feel like this is a really low piece of hanging fruit to engage, sort of connect us all across the country, inspire people, and also to hold athletes accountable. If you say you want to be the best in the province, well, what are you doing to accomplish that? This is a concrete way to see what your commitment level is like. The big key for bringing in Derek, and I'll introduce Derek in a second, is really the collection and the use of the data. So that's where we maybe haven't taken this over the finish line in the past, is being able to really use the data. So we've done targeted national team testing, and we haven't done a great job of storing that data, using the data. And we are now in the digital age. We're able to do this a lot more easily, and we need to do this, frankly. So instead of us squash pros banging our heads together, we brought in a third-party expert. So Derek Vandenbrink, I'm very pleased to introduce. You can see his bio. He brings a ton of experience. He's an expert in the subject matter. He's an expert in long-term development, and he's got a specific sort of emphasis on testing data, and he's worked with a variety of sports and NCAA programs to do this. So we brought Derek in November, and we started hammering away at this, and we've put 4 to 5 really good months in, and we feel like we're in a position where we can almost launch this, as you'll see tonight. We've been working alongside Squash Canada, all the top coaches, all the committees, and keeping the PTs informed all the way through. So we've had a lot of good feedback on this. The program isn't 100% finished yet, so we do want to hear your feedback. We're looking at sort of a late April, early May launch. So we are looking to hear what you think about this, and this is one of the reasons we're presenting it. Before Derek starts, I'm just going to give a couple of quick FAQs that seem to come up in these discussions. So you may look at the testing and you may think it's very basic, and that's the point. So what we've tried to create here is baseline tests that are very simple and that any under 15 player from BC to Newfoundland can complete. And so that is the target sort of age group. These are baseline tests. This is where you need to be to become a high performance player. They're not going to tell you how you stack up against maybe the best player in the world, but they're going to point you in the right direction of the things you need to learn. There will be a second battery coming along, what we're going to call battery B, and that'll be a little bit more complex. And that will be designed for national team athletes so we can really put them through the ringer. But the purpose of this battery A is a baseline testing program. As I said, execution is the key. So the tests aren't perfect that you're going to see today, but we feel they're 90% perfect, and we can haggle about the exact test to use. But really the critical component here is the execution of it and the data collection, which we're going to focus on. We like the tests. We think they're going to be very useful and squash specific. Derek's going to talk about it. And really, that's it. I can't thank Derek enough. He's besides all the academic work he's done, he's a squash nut. So he's got 2 daughters that play, and he eats, lives, and breathes squash, and now squash testing. So thanks to Derek. You're in, buddy.
All right, thanks a lot, Jamie, and thanks everybody for I guess agreeing to listen to me. So a little bit about testing, if that's okay. Probably not most often considered the most gripping topic, right? But as Jamie said, this is really one of the fundamental things that any major sport has, is having a robust testing program, right? And so a robust testing program consistently produces meaningful data over the long term and must be clearly relevant to everyone involved. So when I was looking through the list of folks that were in the presentation today, I saw athlete names, which I'm aware of because around Squash Ontario camps. I saw some coaches, and certainly there'll be some parents in the background, if not even just doing dishes, then actually the ones who are interested in what maybe their kids might be involved in. And certainly organizations from across the country, every single provincial and territorial squash organization. And a robust testing program must consistently produce meaningful data over the long term and clearly relevant to everyone who's involved in squash. And so like the game of squash has, we can argue about how many elements of it, but for simplicity's sake and for, the beautiful graphic I put together with that little squash ball in the middle, there's 5 big things. There's technical element of the game, and there's the physical element of the game. And, those are in effect closed elements of the game. We can isolate those and we can see what those elements exist like in the court, and we can evaluate athlete within the athlete, between athletes, between groups, between ages. We can assess and see your skill level on the technical side, and we can see that on a physical side in a really controlled environment, which is what really testing is about. Other things like your ability to react, your tactical decisions or your tactical choices, the choice that you have on court. If you have a selection of 3 shots to hit and you know where your opponent is, which choices are you making? Those are open parts of the game. They're open skills, and those are a lot more difficult to test, right? Those are tested in gameplay, where technical and physical stuff we can test outside of the game in more of a skill development and a more controlled environment. So while we're testing, within the athlete. So for example, we can take athlete Derek or my daughter or any of the athletes on the court here or on the call here, is to objectively determine an athlete's baseline performance. So any athlete on the call here, when you go through these tests, you will know with numbers what your baseline performance is. And then when you perform the same tests over time, you can measure your athletic performance progress over time. So if we measure in Q1 at the end of March, and then you measure at the end of June, if you see improvements in some of the racket skills and decreases in your times on some of the tests, that means you're getting better with the technical skills and you're becoming faster in your physical skills. When those 2 things are blended together with reaction, tactics, and choices, you're probably a better squash player. Okay. We also want, testing is great because this also helps to compare between. So not just within the individual, but also between individuals. So we've got individual athletes. Like, for example, we could compare Holly to Danielle. Now, they were both just playing at blackball. Danielle got to the second round, and Holly was knocked out in the third. Now, they didn't play each other, obviously, but, if these 2 athletes were testing together, there's a good chance they would be really close, but there would also be some fine differences that we could tease out. We can compare performance between an individual athlete and an individual group. So for example, we could compare Holly's scores with the average score of the top 10 senior females. So where does Holly stack up as an individual against the rest of her cohort? Or where does a U15 girl stack up against the top U15 girls in the country? Does she have average or above average racket skills? Does she have average or above average physical skills? And in knowing what those are, we can address things in their game. The last thing is that we can compare performance between groups of athletes. So we can see what the makeup of a U17 versus a U19 athlete is looking like, or what the makeup between the Ontario female U17s and the BC female U17 athletes. What's happening between regions? Why are the Ontario athletes so much better at the physical skills, but why are the BC athletes so much better at the technical skills? And we can do a bit of a post-mortem on the results saying, what are you doing over there? And why are those numbers so different than what we're doing over here? Which is what every really good quality program is going to do, is they're going to collect the data, they're going to centralize it, and they're going to analyze it in a way which helps them understand what this data is. So at the end of the day, the most important thing about testing is to identify gaps that exist in performance, and so that we can strategically address these gaps going forward in long-term development plans. So how testing is done. So one thing that Jamie said here in the top FAQ is that, look, these tests that you're going to see are going to be simple. And that is absolutely true. And they were designed that way. In effect, Jamie and I, when we set up for the test, there was pretty much a pretty strong mandate, which was it's got to be ridiculously simple, and it has to be all done on the court, and there has to be no extra tools involved. So straight away, like any weights are out, anything that you would otherwise think of with respect to an audio track or beep test, that's out, because then all of a sudden extra gear is involved, no mats, nothing. It's all simple. So step one, and we can turn this into a nice fun little acronym SERVE. Okay, we're going to serve up the testing here. So simple, to set up, to conduct, and to log. So that's really from the coach or the assessor standpoint, is this needs to be really simple, as little steps as possible and easy to operate. It needs to be efficient in time, in energy, and cost. I can't think of a single athlete who loves showing up for squash and is getting the whole run of testing. Same thing for coaches. Coaches don't want to test, they want to train. But what's important to know is that testing is not the same as drilling. There's a lot of really wonderful drills, and not every drill makes a great test. So we want to make sure that not only is it simple, but it's efficient in time, energy, and cost to everyone who's involved in it. And it's also really relevant to the game, to the athlete, and to the coach. We want to make sure that the tests that are involved in this, they taste and smell like squash to the biggest degree that they can, because that's the game, and the game is specific, really specific. There's a lot of extremely specific things about squash that are not happening in other sports. So we want to make sure that the tests that are involved are as specific to squash as possible. That includes the physical tests. Two main things from a tester, from an analysis standpoint with respect to testing, is that it needs to be reliable, which is, again, why we had to simplify the test so much, is because regardless of the person evaluating, whether they are in Nova Scotia or whether they're in British Columbia, an accurate score on one particular test must be consistently gathered. Okay, so we can't have, if the athlete is performing one test over here and one test over here, or they perform a test yesterday and a test today, their numbers should be really, really close, really close. And their number should not rely on the person who's collecting the data, and their number should not be so variable that whatever they're trying to do, the test is providing wildly different numbers, because then the test isn't saying anything, right? So regardless of the evaluator, accurate scores can be consistently gathered. And then lastly, the test is valid, which means that the test is measuring what it's supposed to. And so we've done all of the work in each of the tests to make sure that that test is measuring something specific to the game. And then we've also made sure each test is reliable, it's relevant, it's efficient, and it's simple. Okay. Now, one of the biggest objections with testing straight away, certainly I've seen it from not so much in athletes across the number of sports I've looked at, but it typically comes from parents, and it comes from the subject matter coaches. So for example, it's a hockey coach, or it's a football coach, soccer coach, tennis coach, and it's like, look, just because you test and you get a good result on your test doesn't mean you're a great player. And I'll put my hand up, and I fully agree with that. But I would also say the next sentence would be, but every great player has great results in their technical and physical tests. So just because you test well doesn't mean you're a great player, but great players will test really, really well. So what it is it's a way to identify if you have the requisite skills to be a great player with the closed elements of the game, with the technical and the physical aspects of it. That doesn't tell us that you're great at reacting. It doesn't tell us you're great at tactical skills, or it doesn't tell you that you're great at making the right choices at the right time. But it does tell us if you have the technical ability to be great, and if you have the physical ability to be great. And if you don't have one of those two things, which we can control, then there's a gap for us, and we can address that. So if technically you're behind your cohort, but you're making all the other great stuff about your game, then we know what our biggest win is going to be in training. If everything else is great, but you're way behind physically, you're slower, you don't have the ability to keep up, and then once you're tired, you're making poor choices on the court. We all know how that goes. Then instead of working on racket skills, maybe you get a little bit extra physical stuff on the court, right? So it helps us ID gaps. So in a bit of a review, the robust testing program, it respects and integrates all 5 elements of our SERV acronym. It allows for the meaningful understanding of athlete results and their relationship to their performance on the court, so it needs to be obvious to the athletes and all the other stakeholders. It provides a comparison of athletes across demographics and regions, and lastly, it helps identify performance gaps, which then helps guide training and development. So before training and development programs can really be put in place, we got to have testing involved. So kind of without further ado, let's get to these tests here. So Nikki is smiling as always in this picture here. And we've got 5 technical tests. Okay, we've got forehand drives, so we have rail drives, and tape width. So you can see here there's 15 centimeters between the side wall and the tape, and that's in the service box. And behind the service box to the back wall will be 25 centimeters between the side wall and the tape. And to be clear, tape is out. Okay, in the entire sport and every other way, hitting a line is out. So for the national testing, and all these details are part of the instruction manual, which is coming your way very shortly, tape lines are out. So make sure that when you're doing the testing, there is a gap of 25 centimeters behind the service line, and then the tape is applied. If a ball hits tape, it's out. Okay, just like the rest of the game. And then, so there's the forehand drive. So the maximum number of drives you can hit in those targets inside of 2 minutes is going to be the score that you log. Same on the backhand side. And then there's forehand straight drives, straight volleys. And that's a split stance. That's going to be 1 foot behind the short line. And how many volleys can you hit? And then we're going to count 2 separate things on that. We're going to count the best consecutive number of volleys. That could be 30, 40, 50 without making a mistake. And we will also count your total volleys in that 2 minutes. So best consecutive round and also the cumulative total number of volleys that happen inside of that 2 minutes on the forehand side and on the backhand side. And then lastly, the last technical test is the figure 8 volleys. I think everybody on this call will have done figure 8 volleys a gajillion times themselves, and really easy. 1, 2, 3, 4. You just count the best number and you count your total number of figure 8 volleys. So as you can imagine on here, testing is not something that the athlete is going to do on their own. Testing is something that they have an evaluator. That's going to be their coach, and their coach has got a clipboard and a piece of paper in the testing log, which we'll be providing, and they'll score it in a very specific way. Okay, to reiterate, drilling is not testing. Testing has to be done in a very specific way so that we can trust the numbers that we have. If we can trust the numbers, then we can benchmark them across genders and across age groups all over the country, no matter where you are. And then you know where you compare across the country within your region and across the country. So those are the technical details on those. And we have videos for all these as well, although I imagine everybody on the call knows kind of what we're talking about on those. The ones which will be a little bit new.
Can I jump in real quick there?
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
Okay, just go back really quickly. No, I definitely wanted to credit Jamie Hickox, because these tests were rolled out in 2010 and they're very, very good. And so a lot of you will have seen this before. If you go to a squash club, you'll see these markings, a lot of them. And Jamie went around the country doing these tests. And so we messed around with them with national team athletes and a bunch of coaches. And we sort of determined that this was still really relevant and a really good test. So credit to Jimbo. We also have a whole bunch of backlog data that we can use to help us. We can see what was happening in 2010 and some of those players, even Holly and Danielle, when they were juniors. So that's why we're keeping these tests. They're great. And there's still a few little tweaks to work out in the manual in terms of just making it super consistent on how to do the test. So that's just a little spiel. Back to you, Derek.
Thanks, boss. And actually, so Jamie is at our club at Greystone in Kitchener, Waterloo, and 4 out of the 5 courts have these lines on them. And the first time we were in, he was working with the girls. These lines are in play, and so yeah, like I'm familiar with these lines. I know a lot of people are familiar with these lines, is because they work, right? They're simple, it's efficient. The less friction that comes to play with respect to installing tests and information into the coaches is really, really important. If what we already know is really a good idea for testing, then that makes the whole process really simple. So we didn't want to blow everything up and provide you with a whole bunch of fancy things. Like, these things work. They work, and they work really well. The next challenge here is not finding tests that work. It's scaling the ability to collect the data so that we know what numbers we need to drive towards, in particular genders, age groups, and across the country. So those are the technical tests. And lastly on that is that, again, one of the most curious challenges is actually describing these tests and removing a whole lot of room of interpretation on these tests. Because again, testing is not drilling. So being very specific about what counts and what does not count is really, really important for testing, so that we have accurate numbers, and it is done repeatedly across the country. And so the instruction manual is quite large. That's not to be intimidating, it's because it's very detailed. So that's coming your way. So the five physical tests, it's kind of like 5+1. So we've got a standing long jump, which I'll show you videos of this in a second. We've got corner repeats, which is a very specific squash test. It is attacking the front court and attacking the back court markers. We've got split squats, side planks, and a 40-20 sidewall shuttle. So the standing long jump, I'll just fly over to, you guys all see yourselves there. So standing long jump, this test there, so I can say thanks to Cam and Ravi for this. The standing long jump, this test is evaluating overall power. So single effort power, which is, if you're watching the black ball right now, you'll see somebody scrambling or producing some really intense movement, single effort. Perhaps they're retrieving the ball up front, or they got to scramble to the back. They slam into the corner, they got to push right back to the tee. That's single effort power. So a standing long jump is an indication of full body power. So you'll see Cam here jump, really easy to execute. You start with your foot behind the line, you measure at the heel, the tester walks away, writes down the number, and then you'll see Ravi here breaking a world record on this. Cam was in his ear the whole time, and Ravi just, I had enough of this, and he absolutely slams one. So it's really important to make sure that the athlete starts at the right spot, they finish without falling back, and you get your marker. So that's the standing long jump, overall full body power. The next one is designed specifically for the squash court. What I want you to think about here, if you can follow my cursor, is that you'll see a small blue marker over here in the front corners. Okay, that's 2 meters back from the tin, and it is 30 centimeters in from the wall. Again, just like the technical tests, all of the lines are out, right? So you want to be within the line. So you'll see Cam here slam around. The intention of this test is to test the ability to move forward and back in a squash specific way, or if you were retrieving a ball off of a drop and you're performing it 10 times, 5 per side, the intention is to do it as quickly as possible. So you'll see him fly. He's got to touch his racket inside of that target, and then he's back. And then he's got to split the tee line, got to get both his feet on the launch pad there, and then he flies over again. Cam thought that was a top 5 test. So what this test is evaluating is Cam's squash specific ability to produce the very relevant kind of step over step power from the tee line to the front court and then return. So it is about overall power, but it's also about his ability to continue to repeat that power. So this would be the anaerobic endurance, or this would be the anaerobic lactic system that's really starting to play a game here. Our athletes will get done this test between 25 and 30 seconds. sometimes under 25 seconds. And if anybody's been involved in testing, they've heard of a Wingate test, which is an all-out 30-second sprint on a bike. Not fun to do. I wouldn't recommend it unless someone's forcing you to do it. But this is an analogy of that, which is how fast can you go for 25 to 30 seconds, but in a squash-specific way. And what we wanted to do with these tests is to make them smell like squash as much as possible. And so a squash athlete will be able to be much better at this test particular than, for example, a football athlete or a tennis athlete or a hockey athlete, because they don't know how to get in and out of the corners like that and put their racket in the specific spot. So that's the front court test. And then we have the back court repeat. So on the back court, you'll see Cam. Oh, sorry. Oh, no. Sorry about that buffer problem. So here you'll see Cam is standing on the launch pad here, and then there's two blue lines, which are 1.30 meters from the back. And just for context, I worked with Jamie, and then I also worked with Jimbo or Jamie Hickox on these markers to qualify what the best case scenario is on the markers and where to be touching. So what's going to happen here? Same idea of the test is it's 10 touches as quickly as possible, 5 on each side, starting and returning always to the launch pad here in the middle. And so Cam's going to fly out back. He's going to touch the wall right through the middle, come back again. So again, extremely specific squash movement. You can see his foot positions are very, very good, as he has to scramble back and be more of a pressure shot from the back wall. So there we go. Again, the squash athletes that we've had go this through, they understand the relevance of the test, and there's a big difference between those people who are fast on the court and those people who are slow on the court. The fun stuff that we can also do here, which we hadn't been able to do before, is understand the difference between front and back court speed, which you can't just do if you're doing a field speed test. So how quickly are athletes moving forward versus how quickly are those athletes moving backwards, and we be able to find what a good ratio is, what that good difference could be, so that we can even address things more specific, like if you need to learn how to move fast back court, or if you're really slow going forward. So this is a really fun test that we're going to get a lot of information from. We've got 3 more tests here. Both of those tests, just I guess to qualify, as a heads up, those tests are single effort tests. So you would only do that once, because that's going to be really, really taxing on your system. Okay. The split squats here, in testing, you'll see lots of time that testing is done kind of on both legs or both feet. You can think of a push-up test. You can think of a wall sit, things like that. Obviously, everybody on this call is a squash aficionado and has spent a lot of time on the court. We all know that squash is a one-sided game, right? There's forehand, backhand. You got one leg in front of the other almost all of the time. So the muscular endurance test on the lower body, which we wanted to do, which is what this accomplishes, needs to be in a split position to get our best understanding of what's going on. Also, when it's in a split position, we have a very clear top and bottom on this. So the split squat is how many of these split squats can you do in 60 seconds? Knee to ground, front leg straight, and the rest of it pretty much sorts itself out. So you'll see both Cam and Ravi go here. Their knee will touch the ground, then their front knee goes straight. How many of those can they do in 60 seconds? The answer to this is, Cam's coming in, I think he did 47 to 49 on both sides. And you'll see he's just pounding away. He gets a really good consistency. You'll see Ravi slow down a little bit sooner. Everybody thinks this test is easy until about 30 seconds in, and then they really don't enjoy their life for the remaining 30 seconds. It's a fun way to understand your ability to produce body weight movement as quickly as you can over 60 seconds. In this case, they're obviously left side forward or left side dominant. So this is a big test of that left leg. Are we at right 45 seconds? So Cam's actually going to hit a bit of a wall here real quick. And he just, it's interesting to watch from the outside in as a coach. So you would do that on both sides, on left side, and then we even have instructions on how long to wait. And then you would do it on the right side as well. So that's testing lower body, one-sided muscular endurance, which is obviously very important in the game of squash. Lots of rallies are beyond a minute once you hit a certain skill level, and you've got to be able to not just deal with the cardiovascular and the skill side of it, but also just your body's ability to keep up from a strength side of it or an endurance side of it, because we all know that as soon as you get tired, your choices start becoming a whole lot harder to make. This one here is a side plank on the hand, and if these guys were just going to strike a pose here, it would kind of look like a magazine, right? But that's actually not what's going to happen. They're going to pop up and hit a T position, and they're actually going to hold this. So how this test goes, to be clear, and it doesn't actually matter if you see them because this is a held position. So this is testing torso stability and torso and muscular endurance. Almost every testing program has a muscular endurance test in it for the torso. Ours had been no difference, although it was just a front plank. But again, the game is asymmetrical, so we wanted to test one side strength versus the other side strength. And what we're finding is we can also test the shoulder strength here when you get on your hand. When you're on your hand, that also means you don't need a mat. So everything, again, can be done on the squash court and doesn't need any special equipment whatsoever. So these guys are just going to hang out and hit a T position. They're going to make sure that they keep a straight spine from toes all the way up to their chin. So this remains straight. And this test is done in 15-second blocks. So if you can hold it for 15, then you get a score of 15. If you can hold it for up to 30, then you get a score of 30. And then what happens is when you fail on the test, then your score is the last one that you cleared. So I think we'll see Ravi fail here in not that long. I think he was a bit surprised by how difficult the test would have been. He clears, I think, 45, doesn't make it to 60, therefore his score is actually 45. Okay, you can trust me that Ravi fails on this, okay? And that's testing shoulder endurance as well as torso endurance as well. And then the last one here is the 40-20 sidewall shuttles. Lots of shuttle work has been done on the court before. There's variance between what's going to the front, the back wall, and what going side to side. Jamie and I spent a lot of time beta testing this. We had originally gone front wall, 60 seconds on, 30 seconds off. Then we went, well, can we go half markers? And that's really impossible. So what we decided to do is to go sidewall. And knowing that the transition between points is relatively low time. So we wanted to put in good hard effort for 40 seconds and then rest 20, and then we repeat that 10 times. So you do 10 sets of the following as you watch these guys go. The overall score is the number of touches that you get. So this would be 1 for Cam, and then 2, and 3. And then what happens is you count for those 40 seconds, and then you record that as they rest for 20, and they do it again. And they do it again for a total of 10 times. Both lads were pretty surprised by how difficult the test was to do. And what happens is you probably start really hot, and then you find yourself into a rhythm, and then when you know the test is ending, there's a bit of a peak. So the overall scoring is the total number of touches you can get inside of that 10 minutes is the overall testing score. But the coach is going to, or your evaluator is going to log each interval for testing. So those are the tests. I didn't get any interruptions from Jeff or Jamie there, so that might have gone relatively smooth. You can see here the launch pad on those on-court tests, the back court, and then to the front court, you can see the tape markings. And just know that the testing manual is coming on the way. So if you had questions to this, hopefully you can put them in the chat and we can address them, when Q&A time. Jamie, do you want to add anything there with respect to the physical or technical testing?
Yeah, I will. And then I've got 2 or 3 more minutes, so then we'll hopefully have some questions.
Sure.
Adrian's already got a good one here. So I think I would preface the questions with saying we do have a very extensive manual, and I think Jeff is going to email it to you all tomorrow with the slide, or maybe even tonight, I'm not sure. So it's ready to go. And you'll kind of be the first people getting a sneak peek at it. And it has all of this really detailed. And secondly is the videos. Something we're going to be doing shortly is cleaning up the videos and getting them professionally done, and just so you can really see it. This was pretty raw, but we needed to get something on video so we could start to distribute it around the country and get people beta testing it, as Derek said. So Derek, if you want to flip the slide, I'll just finish up here. So into the practical applications, we're still tweaking a few little things, and that's where your feedback will be helpful, but we would like to launch this in the next six to 8 weeks. So right now, I guess from a practical application, most of these results are going to come in a camp format. So that could be a Canada Winter Games camp in any of the PTs. It could be a national team camp. And so these aren't really designed to be done by me on a Wednesday night with my brother. These are designed to be done in a group, where they have a professional evaluator. That's not to say you can't practice them as much as possible, as much as you want. I've been having fun doing them myself, but these are meant to be in a camp format primarily. So provincial level athletes and higher, we'd like to see them tested a minimum of 3 times a year formally. And these results will be overseen by a provincial coach or a national coach, or anyone really that's been certified and sort of trained in the program. It's really critical that we have consistency with the delivery of the program. So our first job is getting 300 athletes in, and we're going to be doing that early May. We're going to be targeting sort of provincial and national team level athletes. We want 300 results, and that's going to be to populate the system. It's going to be to get baseline results in, and it's going to be used so when we open it up to the general public later on in the summer, you'll actually be able to get immediate feedback on where you stand. So that's sort of the first benchmark. Early May, we will be doing a sort of national testing week, number 1, and we'll be targeting those 300 athletes. Okay, so national and provincial coaches will have access to the athletes' results, both as a collective and individually. So if you're the provincial coach in Saskatchewan, you'll have all your athletes in the database, and you'll be able to see your athletes, and you'll also be able to see how they stack up against other provinces. National team coaches will have access as well, but it's not open to the general public per se. You have to be working with your PT organization or the national program. There'll be lots of opportunities to engage larger community, which I think will be really fun. I see in September, as we're sort of returning to play, you could have fun member nights. You could get your Tuesday night women's clinic to do the tests, and we really want to use it as an engagement tool. We want to get people having fun with it and seeing where they stand. Last thing to note on that is athletes must have assigned consent. It's sort of part and parcel that the results won't be shared, and they'll have to sign a waiver or be enlisted actively in their provincial or national team program. When results do come out, you won't be able to see anyone else's specific results. You'll only get information on where you stand in the mean and where you stack up against the top in both your cohort or national team cohort. So if you're a U15 male, you'll be able to see where you stack up nationally against other U15 males, and you'll also be able to see where Nick Sackby or Andrew Schnell is. Next. So next steps, and then into the questions. So coaches and players are encouraged to practice on their own as much as possible. I encourage anybody on this call to go out and do these tests. They're really fun. Certainly great workout as well, and start to familiarize yourself. So in the testing manual, you will get sheets that you can print off, and so that'll all be done for you. And start taking the test, start practicing. So when you're putting this, putting your provincial team athletes through it, you're dialed in. You know how it works. So we will get our formal launch and some higher quality videos done in April, and the national testing session number 1 will be in May, where we'll bang off that first 300 athletes, and then we'll have national testing session number 2 in the summer, where we'll open it up to a wider group. So we'll get into questions and just thank you and get training. So I can read the chat, Jeff. You want me to just crank through it?
Yeah, go ahead, Jamie. That was a fantastic presentation, and yeah, go ahead with these first couple of questions. And if anyone has other questions, please start typing in the chat.
Okay, beautiful. So Adrian, that will be detailed in the manual. Derek, you can give Adrian just a quick, how far back is the launch pad?
Pardon me?
Adrian's asking how far back the launch pad is, but I think he'll see once he gets the manual. It's detailed.
Yeah, I think
so. Quick answer.
I think it's I think it was half. I think it's half a meter, but it's like this. All of that information. If you have a question about exactly where that line is, that's paramount, right in your face in the manual. Every test is detailed in a very particular way, with a lot of thought and effort to make this clear. I guess that's perhaps one of the reasons why I would have been a good fit to put that manual in, because I've done a ton of testing, and I also am a professor, so I've got a lot of students and they need very, very clear instructions if I'd like a group of 50 to do something in a lab inside of an hour. So instructions are, I would say, about as clear as they could be. But the details on lines, et cetera, those are all extremely clear in the test setup.
Yeah. Jeff has got a great one. So would there be a basic warm-up that we could recommend to get you ready for these tests? I know in the manual it talks about when you first start doing the tests, you want to do them at 50% capacity or intensity, and then 75% intensity, and then 100%. So when you go do them tomorrow, do not go full tilt. These will hurt you. But to Jeff's point, Derek, we could probably put in the manual sort of a suggested warm-up because it's important.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a good point on that. What I would say is, ideal. This is on squash, or not on squashers in particular, but on lots of athletes, is nobody goes to play their sport and loves the part where they got to warm up and not play their sport yet, right? So, but when it comes to testing, these are all out events, right? And all out events do really require you to prepare yourself for those full capacity efforts. So, for example, like when we had Cam and Ravi in for the testing, we went through a full generic warm up. I say same thing. I had a group of kids that did it. The Hickok kids and my kids do it. We would have spent 10 minutes doing a bunch of different core warm ups between track drills and up and downs and deep lunges, because that's what the position they got to get in, ins and outs. Getting on the court, even if you're doing your physical test, getting on and doing some racket stuff, doing some ghosting drills. Again, like anything that you would otherwise prepare yourself for a hard match, you'd want to make sure that you're doing that for this. And then Jamie's correct. Inside of each of the physical tests, there are specific instructions on not just how the test operates, but how to prepare for that test. So, for example, those front courts, those corner repeats, the split or the standing long jump, that's a 50% effort, then a 75% effort, then a 90% effort, and then you're super warm by that point, and then you're ready to go, with rest intervals also prescribed in that instruction manual. So at the end of the day, warming up super important if you wanted to get your best results. So you're right on that, Jeff.
Yeah, good point. Mello has a question about playing squash in the gray zone in Toronto. It's pretty grim, Mello, but you can talk to Lauren. She knows all the hot spots. Jeff's got a good question about COVID. I mean, this whole thing our whole lives have been delayed by COVID. So yes, very, very good point. But we do feel like, I know in BC and Alberta, Ontario and Quebec right now, people are at least able to access a court. So this is going to be one of the first things you can do, is to get these tests done. So of course it's all COVID related, but in theory, as soon as you have access to a court and one other person or small group, you can get off the ground and banging these out.
I got one thing to add about the testing, and I know you've said it a couple times, and you said it in the slide, and I think it's really important for the athletes on the call to get out and to make sure that they practice these tests. And you'll have access to the videos that we've shown. You have access to the instruction manual, which comes with pictures as well. But also equally important is for the coaches on this call to practice testing, not doing the testing, but logging the tests. It all looks simple until you've got to evaluate. And it all looks simple until you forgot your pen in the office, or you tried using your phone to do it and you missed a button or stuff. So this is it's really important to practice the actual testing itself as a coach, as an evaluator, so you are aware about all the little things that could otherwise go wrong. And to that end, we've provided testing logs, paper testing logs, which you can print out and use with your clipboard, which is the best case scenario. You do not want to bring in an electronic device into the court in case the battery dies or you hit the wrong button or something. You're not going to hit the wrong button by writing this down on a piece of paper. We've also provided electronic logs that are part of the testing log. You can scan the log, or you can hit a link on your computer. And when you do that, you can download an Excel file, which is matched to the testing log. So you just input your numbers, and then you can keep track of your side, all of your athletes in your electronic log as well, because we'll need your electronic log to submit these numbers over time. So all that stuff is actually already provided for you.
Yeah. Jeff, good point. Most of them you can adapt to be outdoors. I've been doing the split squats and the side squats in my basement. and lots of backyard ghosting. So I would think so. You can start to get a flavor for it. Adrian's really upset about the 5K test. Adrian, you can keep doing that test. I'll record your results. I'll take
Keep
them.
going.
Just keep going.
Yeah. Don't stop for us.
Man, I haven't ran 5K in a while. That reminds me. Good point, Adrian. Well, that was great, Derek. There's no more questions. I think this is we're going to have fairly regular webinars, but certainly Derek and I are very enthused about this. So we're happy to answer questions anytime. Email us and get out there and do it. And if you think something's not working or you don't, you have questions after you do it, send them. We want to hear from you. And we're really, excited. This is going to be a great way for the Canadian squash community to sort of be together and engage and do something together. So yeah, let's stay in touch on it and get out there and let's all get fitter and better squash players.
Great, thanks, Jamie and Derek. That was a fantastic presentation and straightforward and to the point. For those still on the call, just a friendly reminder that Jamie will be back next Tuesday, March 23rd, same time, same place on GoToMeeting, doing another athlete development webinar on next gen and junior national teams. So he'll have that presentation for you next Tuesday. Following that, on April 6th, we'll have a Coach PD webinar on Squash 57. And then on April 20th, we'll have a Coach PD webinar on doubling down on double squash by Eric Baldwin. And I should mention the Squash 57 is a group effort being led by David Morrish and Lolly Gillen and a number of other presenters. So please register for them all. They're all free. We're looking forward to you registering for them and participating. But with that being said, again, thank you, Jamie and Derek, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's presentation.
Thanks, everyone. Derek, can you stay on for 2 seconds and Jeff as well?